Hey guys, it's Six Paths Theorist here, back again with another part of What If Naruto Had Sasuke's Sharingan. Before we dive in, please, as always, like, share and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Chapter 3, Part 2. Under the bruising light of the newly risen sun, Naruto sat on the shattered stump of what had once been a training post, the only sound the rough pull of his breath settling back into a steady rhythm. He uncorked a canteen, the water within warm from proximity to his exertions, and drank deeply, the liquid a tangible metric of his physical toll. The clearing around him was a testament to a week of self-annihilation and rebirth, a scorched, pitted, and churned monument to his will. With water easing the dryness in his throat, he drew out the well-worn integration scroll from its protective tube. The parchment was smudged with dirt and sweat, the edges softened from constant handling. His eyes, now their customary deep onyx but holding a harder, more focused light, scanned the final entry under Sasuke's legacy integration progress: Taijutsu Uchiha interception and flow mastery synthesis. His finger, nail cracked and rimmed with grime, found the small box beside it. He didn't tick it with a flourish. He pressed the tip of his thumb into the ink pad of a compact seal-ink, while he carried and stamped a firm, dark circle in the space. It was less a checkmark and more a seal of finality, an official closure. It was done, the core of Sasuke's combat prowess, the Taijutsu, the Shuriken art, the fire nature techniques had been broken down, internalized and reforged with the relentless, overwhelming pressure of his own Uzumaki spirit. The power was no longer Sasuke's, it was his own, a new alloy unique to him. He re-rolled the scroll, its purpose fulfilled. A chapter had ended. He sat for a long moment, the sudden quiet in his mind as notable as the silence in the clearing. The driving, desperate need to assimilate his brother's gift had been his sole compass for days. Now, with the destination reached, a new question emerged from the stillness: what next? The answer came not as a revelation, but as the logical next step in the armament plan he had sketched out in his sparse apartment. He grunted, pushing himself to his feet with a grunt of sore muscles. I think it's time to go grab that weapon I ordered. The thought had been germinating since he first acknowledged his lack of a dedicated armament. He hadn't wanted a sword like Zabuza's, that required two hands, and his fighting style was evolving into something that demanded a free hand for seals, for grappling, for the unpredictable. He had visited a discreet, non-affiliated blacksmith on the village's industrial edge 2 days prior, a man known for custom work and no questions. He'd paid with a significant portion of his mission savings, and sketched a design that blended brutal pragmatism with a hint of his own developing philosophy. It was time to see if the forge had kept its promise. He gathered his weathered weapons pouch, slung it over his shoulder, and took one last look at the clearing his silent forge. Then he turned and melted into the trees, heading not for home, but for the soot-stained alleyways of the artisans' district, a young man on a mission to collect a tool forged for the wars to come. Across Konoha under the same morning sun, Sakura Haruno stepped out of the hospital's sliding doors, blinking in the brightness. The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to her clothes, layered over the subtler, more organic smells of poultices and dried herbs. Her shift in the medical ward was over, but her self-appointed duty was perpetual. There were gaps in her toxicological knowledge, specifically regarding synergistic effects of certain rare fungal spores native to Lightning Country that could induce paralysis. The Konoha Ninja Library's restricted botanical annex held treatises she needed. Her mind, a labyrinth of chakra diagrams, chemical compounds, and surgical procedures, was so intensely focused on mentally reviewing the structural formula of amanitin that she failed to register the trio turning the corner ahead of her. The collision was soft, more a rustle of fabric than an impact. Oof, she stumbled back a step, her analytical reverie shattered. Sakura. Sakura looked up, her green eyes refocusing from an internal world of molecules to the concerned face of Ino Yamanaka. Behind her, looming and snacking on a bag of barbecue chips, was Choji Akimichi, and slouching with his signature expression of profound bother, Shikamaru Nara. Team 10 in all its familiar, casual cohesion. A flicker of something the ghost of her old social self tried to surface. It was quickly compartmentalized. "Oh, Ino," she said, her voice flat, polite, devoid of its former competitive vibrancy. She gave a cursory glance to the boys. "Good day, everyone." The greeting was delivered with the efficiency of a status report. Without pausing for the banter, the gossip, or the shared inertia that usually characterized their interactions, she sidestepped them with a swift, purposeful motion and continued down the street, her steps quick and directed towards the library's stone facade. The three members of Team 10 stood in her wake, a pocket of stunned silence amid the village's morning flow. Choji paused mid-crunch, his brow furrowed. Shikamaru's lazy eyes, sharper than they appeared, tracked her retreating form. "So unlike her," Shikamaru murmured, the observation laced with uncharacteristic seriousness. The Sakura he knew would have, at the very least, engaged in a brief, spiky exchange with Ino, or offered a shy, polite word to him and Choji. This was a dismissal, clean and absolute. Ino nodded slowly, her bright blue eyes shadowed. The sprig of rosemary she'd given Sakura felt like an artifact from a different era. "She has been like that," Ino said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, since that day. The unspoken event hung between them, heavier than any spoken name. The loss had not just taken a life, it had seemingly vaporized the girl they used to know, leaving behind a focused, driven stranger in her place. Ino watched the pink hair tied in that severe bun disappear into the distance, a strange ache of loss echoing for the living friend, now walking a path they could no longer follow. The door to the Hagarashi weapon shop announced Naruto's entrance with a dissonant chime of old iron bells. The interior was a stark contrast to the sunlit village streeter twilight space, illuminated by the forge's lingering glow from a rear doorway and the cool, metallic gleam of displayed wares. The air was thick with the smells of hot oil, sharpening stone dust, and the ancient, comforting scent of seasoned wood. As his eyes adjusted, he saw a girl exiting past him towards the street. Her hair was styled in two practical high buns, and she moved with a brisk, no-nonsense efficiency that reminded him of a hawk in flight. What truly caught his attention, however, was the sizable, official-looking bill clutched in her hand, a receipt for a substantial order. This wasn't a genin picking up a replacement kunai. This was a serious investment in armaments. The observation was filed away in the new, analytical part of his mind before he turned his focus to the shop's proprietor. Behind a counter scarred by decades of tools and transactions stood the man himself, Hagarashi. He was a mountain of muscle gone slightly to stone. His forearms, thick as young trees, were a tapestry of old burns and one particularly vicious, silvery scar that ran from elbow to wrist, a lifetime of wrestling white-hot metal etched into his skin. His eyes, deep-set under a heavy brow, held the patient, assessing look of a man who judged the worth of people by the quality of the steel they sought. "Welcome to my shop," the man grunted, his voice like gravel shifting. "What do you want to buy?" There was no salesmanship, no false courtesy. It was a demand for purpose. Naruto, used to hostility but of a different, more sneering kind, was momentarily taken aback by the blunt, transactional force of the man's presence. But he quickly schooled his features into the same flat focus he used in training. This was business. "I'm looking for this kind of weapon," he stated, reaching into his pouch and withdrawing a carefully folded sheet of paper. He unfolded it and slid it across the counter. The drawing was detailed, the lines confident. It depicted not a sword but a bow, a staff, yet it was unorthodox. It was shorter than a traditional quarterstaff, designed to be wielded with one hand or two in close quarters. The most distinctive feature were the ends. They flared slightly, and the drawing specified intricate, weighted caps. But the central innovation was the middle section, which was drawn with a textured grip and subtle, reinforced knobs at precise intervals. Hagarashi studied the sketch for a long moment, his grizzled face impassive. "I wonder why you drew it like this," he mused, more to himself than to Naruto, tracing a thick finger over the reinforced midsection. "But regardless, it's right there." He gestured with a thumb towards the back wall, where leaning in a rack was the physical manifestation of Naruto's design. The wood was a deep, rich shinobi's way oak, already polished to a satin finish. It was exactly as drawn. Naruto felt a surge of excitement, but kept it in check. I want the ends made out of steel, tempered with a slight bludgeoning edge, not sharpened for cutting, but for impact, and the weighting needs to be perfectly balanced for the grip points here and here." He pointed to the drawing again, his tone shifting from customer to collaborator. Hagarashi's eyes flicked from the drawing to Naruto's face, the assessment deepening. He saw past the youthful features to the serious intent. This was not a whim. All right, he conceded with a slow nod. Custom forging and mounting, come back in 3 days, payment in full on delivery. Okay, Naruto agreed. He produced a smaller pouch of ryo from his personal down payment he'd prepared. I'll buy the rest of the standard supplies when I come back for it. He nodded towards bundles of kunai, spools of wire, and packets of explosive tags displayed under glass. A curt grunt was his receipt. Without further ceremony, Naruto turned and left the shop, the dissonant iron bells marking his exit. The transaction from entrance to departure had taken less than 5 minutes. It was efficient, stark, and satisfying. He headed home through the midday crowds, his mind already leaping ahead. Now with that, he thought, the image of the custom bow clear in his mind, I will start training in it. A versatile weapon. Can keep distance, can block blades, the weighted ends can shatter bone, and the grip allows for close-quarter locks and throws. It suits me, but a practical problem presented itself. But I wonder where to get the necessary scrolls for Bujutsu. The academy taught basic kata, but what he needed was advanced, combat-proven form styles that integrated with ninja movement, with shunshin, with the unpredictable flow of a real battle. The village library might have historical treatises, but not the gritty, effective battlefield manuals he required. Perhaps Kakashi-sensei, once training resumed, would have resources. Or perhaps, the answer lay in the same isolation that had served him so far. He would have to deconstruct the weapon's potential himself, use the Sharingan's analytical power to envision its applications, and forge his own style through the same brutal, clone-based trial and error that had mastered Sasuke's legacy. The weapon would be an extension of his body. Its art would be an extension of his will. The search for scrolls was a valid path, but the resolve to write his own was already igniting within him. He walked on, the anticipation for the 3-day wait already transforming into plans for the first swing. 4 days later, the sun rose over Training Ground 7, painting the familiar clearing in a light that felt both old and new. Kakashi Hatake stood at its center, not lounging against a tree with his book, but upright, his posture radiating a silent, grim purpose. He felt the absence like a phantom limb. The cool, arrogant presence that should have been standing apart with crossed arms was now a permanent void. What remained of his squad were 2 children who had walked through fire and returned, altered. The first to arrive was Naruto. Kakashi's single visible eye tracked him as he entered the clearing, and a flicker of surprise, quickly masked, passed through his gaze. This was not the boy in the blinding orange jumpsuit. He wore practical, durable black pants and standard-issue blue shinobi sandals. A dark blue shirt hugged his torso, emblazoned over the heart with a single, stark kanji. Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, team. It was a declaration, a memorial, and a challenge all in one. Over this, he wore a modified jacket that blended his signature orange with Uchiha blue, separated by aggressive black stripes, a visual fusion of his identities. His hair longer was pulled into a low, wild mane that reached the middle of his back, with 2 defiant bangs framing a face that had lost its childish roundness, replaced by hardened planes and a solemn set to his jaw. Most tellingly, strapped across his back was a custom-made bow staff, its oak shaft gleaming, its steel-capped ends promising brutal utility. Kakashi noted with a trained eye the subtle, constant fluctuation of chakra around the strap. The boy was unconsciously practicing advanced chakra control, using his own energy to secure the weapon, a testament to relentless, self-directed drilling. Sakura arrived moments later, her transformation equally pronounced. Her once freely flowing pink hair was now ruthlessly disciplined into a severe, tight bun at the back of her head, with only 2 strategic strands left to frame her face, a practical concession that also sharpened her features. Her forehead protector was worn plainly across her brow. She wore black pants and red shinobi sandals. A form-fitting red blouse was reinforced with tight bandages wrapped around her torso, suggesting both support for rigorous activity and a layer of light armor. Her hands were covered by black full-fingered gloves, the kind used for handling hazardous materials or for gaining a better grip in combat. She carried no visible sentiment, only a quiet, simmering readiness. Kakashi let out a low, approving hum. Ma, my students changed their look, good for you. His tone was lighter than he felt, an attempt to bridge the gap to the people they were before. Good morning, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said, his voice steady and respectful, lacking its former explosive energy but carrying a deeper, more grounded weight. Sakura's greeting was an arched eyebrow and a dry observation. So you're not late, sensei. The old, fangirl tone was gone, replaced by a crisp, almost clinical note. Kakashi's visible eye crinkled, but the levity vanished as quickly as it came. His expression settled into one of stark, uncompromising seriousness. Anyway, he let the word hang, the air thickening with anticipation. I'll be putting you two under serious training, like it or not. Naruto met his gaze without flinching, his onyx eyes burning with resolve. Bring it, Kakashi-sensei, he said, each word a hammer strike. I am ready for everything and anything. Yeah, Sakura affirmed, her voice quiet but ironclad, her gloved hands curling into fists at her sides. A faint, grim smile touched Kakashi's lips beneath his mask. Looks like you are ready. He paused, assessing them fully. So, what are we going to learn? He didn't wait for guesses. I know that you, Naruto, have activated the Sharingan, and somehow you have assimilated Sasuke's core techniques. Sakura's head turned slightly towards Naruto, her analytical mind connecting dots. His sudden proficiency, the new gravity in his movements. There was no jealousy, only a sharpening of her own focus. So, Kakashi continued, I'll be assisting you in other training areas, refining what you have, pushing it further and filling the gaps that remain. His gaze shifted to Sakura. And Sakura, I know you have started assisting at the hospital and that you're looking into poisonous things. He said it carefully, acknowledging her path without judgment. I have been surveying you both to see how Sasuke's demise would change you. Regardless of method, it shows maturity on your part. The small, acknowledging smiles they gave were not smiles of happiness, but of recognition, a soldier's acknowledgement of a commander who finally understood the war they were in. I'll be putting you under brutal physical conditioning. Your hand-to-hand combat will be rebuilt from the ground up, both of you, and I'll be starting you on your chakra natures. Even though genin typically don't focus on this, I have special permission from the Hokage. Before they could process this, he produced two small, blank, off-white papers from his vest. Chakra paper, Sakura identified instantly, her studies manifesting. Oh, so you do know it. Good job, Kakashi said, genuinely impressed. He handed one to each of them. Sakura went first. Focusing, she channeled a thread of her chakra into the delicate sheet. It did not cut, burn, or soak. Instead, it wrinkled violently, then darkened, collapsing into a small lump of damp, rich-smelling earth and mud. Kakashi nodded. Earth nature. Surprising but not illogical. Earth was solid, defensive, nurturing the foundation. It suited the new, unshakable resolve at her core, and it was the primary element for many advanced medical and barrier techniques. Then all eyes turned to Naruto. He held the paper, concentrating. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a soft snick, the paper split cleanly into two perfect halves, before the pieces could flutter to the ground. One half spontaneously burst into bright, vigorous flames that consumed it in a blink. The other half crackled with a faint, visible energy, its surface crinkling and blackening as if struck by miniature lightning before disintegrating into ash. The clearing was utterly silent. Kakashi's one visible eye widened, the shock breaking through his usual placid demeanor. Wind, fire, and lightning, three affinities. The fire was expected, given the legacy he carried. The wind, that was his birthright, the heritage of his father, the fourth Hokage. But the lightning, that was a wild card, a powerful and rare synergy. It was a trifecta of immense offensive potential. Whoa, Naruto breathed, staring at the ashes in his palm, feeling the truth of it resonate within his newly complex chakra. Kakashi schooled his expression, the strategic implications already cascading in his mind. So, he said, his voice measured, I can pass on my technique to you after all. For a fleeting, painful second, Kakashi's mind betrayed him. Maybe it would have been Sasuke, a natural fit for the Chidori with his lightning affinity. The thought of the proud Uchiha heir of the training that never was a ghostly pang. He was snapped back to the present by Naruto's voice, sharp with intent. What technique is that? Kakashi looked at the boy, the container of the nine tails. the bearer of the Sharingan, the inheritor of a brother's vengeance, and now the wielder of triplicate chakra nature. The path ahead was fraught with peril, for student and teacher alike. "You'll find out later," Kakashi said, his eye crinkling again, but this time with the weight of a solemn oath. The first lesson had not even begun, and the future of the new Team 7 had already been irrevocably set onto a darker, more electrifying path. The gauntlet was not just thrown, it was crackling with lethal energy. Kakashi gave a slow, deliberate nod, the brief moment of revelation about Naruto's chakra natures settling into the grim bedrock of his new training regimen. "With that out of the way," he said, his voice losing its instructive tone and shifting into one of pure command, "let's move on to the hard things." Before he could continue, a hand sliced through the air with precise, formal motion. Sakura, her expression was not one of uncertainty but of strategic inquiry. "Sensei, I was going to ask you how to raise my chakra reserves. I know they are a little low." She stated it as a clinical fact, a measurable deficiency in her system, like a weak muscle group. There was no self-pity, only a demand for the methodology to correct it. Kakashi's visible eye fixed on her, approving of the directness. I was going to cover that in detail during your individual conditioning, but I will explain the principle now." He crossed his arms, his posture that of a lecturer on the most vital of sciences. "As you know, chakra is synthesized from two components: the spiritual energy of the mind, your will, your consciousness, your yin, and the physical energy of the body's trillion cells, your stamina, your vitality, your yang. To increase the reservoir, you must expand both sources and improve the efficiency of their fusion." He gestured towards the forest surrounding the training ground. "You can meditate, not the empty-minded relaxation of a civilian, but focused, intense meditation. Visualize your chakra pathways, will them to expand. Strain your mind to its limit, crafting and holding complex chakra constructs in your imagination until you have a headache. That builds the spiritual component." His gaze then swept over her physically conditioned form. "Concurrently, you train your body to exhaustion. Push past your limits, break down muscle, strain ligaments, flood your system with lactic acid. Your body, in its desperate bid to adapt and survive, will generate more physical energy. But the key," he emphasized, holding up a finger, "is the synthesis. You must then use your chakra. Push it to its absolute edge, not to the point of total exhaustion and collapse, which risks damaging your coils, but to the very brink. Run tree walking until you slip, not from lack of skill, but because the well is almost dry. Practice your medical diagnostics or genjutsu until your vision blurs and your fingers tremble. It is at that precipice, in that state of extreme demand, that your system receives the signal: Mori is required. And if you nourish it properly and rest deeply, it will answer. It is a slow, grueling, and often painful process of forced evolution." Sakura absorbed every word, her mind already categorizing the information, slotting it into the training schedule she mentally maintained. She gave a sharp, acknowledging nod. The path was clear, and its difficulty was irrelevant. Kakashi then turned his piercing gaze to Naruto, who stood with a stillness that was somehow more intense than any movement. "As for you, Naruto, you need control, a lot of it." The statement was monumental in its simplicity. Naruto met his sensei's eye, his onyx gaze unwavering. "I know," he said, the two words heavy with the frustration of countless leaves that would not stick, of fireballs that were too large, of a chakra sea so dense and potent that shaping it felt like trying to carve marble with his bare hands. He knew it in his bones, in his strained coils, in the very air around him that still sometimes crackled with his barely leashed power. Kakashi saw the understanding, and the profound challenge it represented. Naruto's problem was the diametric opposite of Sakura's, yet just as severe. He wasn't trying to fill a pond, he was trying to build precision irrigation channels through a hydroelectric dam that was constantly on the verge of overflowing. The addition of Sasuke's refined, yin-heavy chakra had only made the internal torrent more complex and volatile. "Right," Kakashi said, the word a period on the preliminaries. The theory was established, the deficiencies were identified, the monumental scale of the task was laid bare before them. He took a single step back, his posture shifting subtly into one of readiness. The air in Training Ground 7 seemed to grow heavier, charged with the promise of sweat, pain, and incremental, hard-won progress. The easy days of D-rank missions and casual tests were a fossilized memory. With that said, Kakashi Hatake announced, his voice dropping into a low, relentless register that brooked no argument and promised no respite. Let's begin. The two words were not an invitation, they were a detonation. They marked the end of one life and the violent, compulsory start of another. For Sakura, it was the beginning of the forging of her well. For Naruto, it was the commencement of the titanic struggle to master his storm. For Kakashi, it was the first, necessary step in keeping his final promise to the dead, by making the living too strong, too skilled, and too resilient to ever need to make such a sacrifice again. The new Team 7's true training had arrived, and it began not with a shout, but with the grim, quiet certainty of a descent into a forge. What followed was not training in any sense the word was commonly understood. It was systematic dismantling. It was a calculated, merciless assault on the physical limits of two 13-year-old bodies, orchestrated by a man who had long mastered the art of transforming agony into ability. Kakashi Hatake became less a sensei and more a force of nature, silent, implacable engine of exertion, a hard ass. There were no explanations beyond the initial brutal logic. Push-ups until their arms trembled and collapsed beneath them, only to be ordered into the next set the moment their chests hit the dirt. Laps around the entire perimeter of Konoha, not at a jog, but at a punishing, sustained run that burned lungs and turned leg muscles into blocks of screaming lead. Sit-ups until their abdominal muscles felt shredded, flutter kicks until their cores were numb pools of fire. Squats, burpees, pull-ups on a hastily erected bar, a relentless circuit of pure, unadulterated physical taxation. The body is the crucible, Kakashi intoned during a rare 5-second water break, his voice devoid of its usual lazy affect, replaced by the cold timbre of a drill instructor. Chakra is the alloy forged within it. Without a vessel of iron, the finest steel will shatter it. This is not optional, this is foundational. For Naruto, the purpose was twofold, explained in clipped, strategic bursts as the boy gasped for air. Your Sharingan will show you the path, Kakashi stated, watching Naruto struggle through a set of one-armed push-ups, his new eyes narrowed in fierce concentration. But if your body cannot move along that path fast enough, the sight is useless. It becomes a taunt. We are building the raw physical speed and explosive power to act on what you see. Your nervous system must learn to fire at the speed of your perception. Every burning sprint, every grueling plyometric jump, was a lesson in closing the gap between thought and action, between the red-line prediction of the Sharingan and the muscle fiber response required to capitalize on it. The dense, potent chakra within him fueled a formidable endurance, but Kakashi pushed him beyond even that, forcing his body to adapt to stresses it had never known, to become a weapon capable of wielding the hyper-awareness it now housed. For Sakura, the calculus was different, but the suffering was equal. Your mind is sharp, your control is exemplary, Kakashi acknowledged as she finished a lap, her face pale but set, sweat plastering the strategic strands of hair to her cheeks. But your furnace is small. To generate more chakra, more of the physical energy component, you must stoke the fire. You must break the body down so it rebuilds itself stronger. Every ounce of muscle you forge, every iota of cardiovascular stamina you claw for, translates directly into a larger reservoir of physical energy to convert. Strength, stamina, speed, they are not just for combat. They are the very foundation of your chakra potential. Her lagging behind Naruto during the village runs was not a mark of failure in Kakashi's eyes, it was data. It showed the current limit of her physical engine, and each day she pushed that limit a meter farther, a second longer, was a victory. She never complained. When her legs felt like water and her vision spotted, she would simply bite the inside of her cheek, focus on the rhythm of her own ragged breath, and drive forward. The memory of her paralysis on the bridge was a lash at her back, more motivating than any of Kakashi's commands. 3 weeks passed in a blur of agonized routine. Sunrise to sunset, their world contracted to the burn of muscles, the taste of copper in their mouths, the blessed relief of cool water, and the hard ground of the training ground. They ate meals that were calculated for caloric and nutritional reload, not pleasure. Sleep was a black, dreamless pit of recovery. And through it all, they did not waver. Naruto's earlier, boisterous determination had been compressed into a silent, diamond-hard focus. The grimace of effort was permanent on his features, but his eyes held a blazing light that saw past the pain, toward the speed and power he was being promised. He would finish a set, gasp for air, and his gaze would immediately find Kakashi, wordlessly demanding the next task. Sakura's resolve was quieter, but no less formidable. There were moments, especially in the final miles of a run or the last few repetitions of a brutal set, where her body screamed for surrender. Her muscles would tremble violently, her form would degrade, yet in her eyes there was no hint of quit. There was only a cold, analytical fury, a war she waged against her own physiology. She would lag, but she would not stop. She would stumble, but she would rise. Her silence was filled with the roaring promise she had made to herself: never again. Kakashi observed this day after grueling day. He offered no praise for their perseverance. That was now the baseline expectation. Instead, he measured their progress in the subtle metrics: the slight increase in Naruto's sprint velocity, the marginal improvement in Sakura's lap time, the hardening definition of muscle where softness had been. They were being broken down, not in spirit, but in form. And from the ashes of their old physical limits, new, tougher, more capable bodies were being built, frame by painful frame, breath by ragged breath. The crucible was merciless, but within it, the first raw ingots of their future strength were beginning to take shape. The path of the shinobi was paved with chakra and will, but the road to that path was built with sweat, tears, and the silent, unyielding refusal to break. The brutal physical regimen was the spine of their new existence, but it was not the entirety of it. Kakashi, in his relentless calculus, understood that the body was only one battlefield. To forge truly formidable shinobi, the mind and spirit required equal, concurrent siege. And his students, driven by their own private furnaces of purpose, refused to let any hour lie fallow. While the dawn to dusk hours belonged to Kakashi's gauntlet of stamina and strength, the edges of the day the pale, quiet hours before first light and the deep, hushed period after dusk became the domain of personal, obsessive refinement. For Naruto, the problem of his new weapon was an equation that demanded solving. The custom bow was a tool of immense potential, but a tool without a manual is merely a club. He could not rely on Kakashi for everything. Some knowledge he had to procure himself. During a precious half-day of mandated rest that felt like agonizing idleness, he did not sleep. He bathed, changed into plain, nondescript clothes, and presented himself at the Hokage's administrative office, not as a grieving genin, but as a shinobi petitioning for resources. His request was specific, polite, and strategically framed. He did not ask for the secret, clan-hoarded scrolls of the Sarutobai's famed staff techniques, nor the esoteric, chakra-conducting manuals of the guard platoon. He asked for the foundational archives, the standard-issue Konoha Bujutsu fundamentals, the historical survey of polearm combat in the wars, and the basic principles of leverage and kinetic transfer. These were the textbooks, the theory behind the muscle memory. They were not restricted, but they were also not commonly sought by genin more interested in flashier ninjutsu. The third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, heard the request from a tuning clerk and felt a complex twist of emotions: pride at the boy's proactive discipline, a pang for the desperate need driving it, and a scholar's appreciation for the methodological approach. He authorized the release personally. That evening, under the glow of a single lamp in his apartment, Naruto's world expanded beyond chakra drills and aching muscles. He studied geometric diagrams of striking angles, the physics of pivots and fulcrums, and the philosophy of using an opponent's strength against them. The dense text merged with the tactile memory of the staff on his back and the predictive lines of the Sharingan in his mind, beginning to form the blueprint of a unique, hybrid style. For Sakura, her other training was a silent, shadow curriculum running parallel to the hospital shifts and poison research. In the deep quiet of her room, her focus shifted from the body's breakdown to the mind's expansion. She began intense, deliberate meditation, not for peace, but for strain. She would visualize her chakra network with terrifying anatomical precision, then will the imaginary pathways to dilate, to strengthen, to become conduits for a greater torrent. She practiced fine chakra control exercises with needles and threads, not for sewing, but to forge neural pathways of exquisite command. She reread her genjutsu theory, now cross-referencing it with her medical knowledge of the nervous system, seeking the precise chakra frequencies to disrupt synaptic signals or hijack sensory input. Her lagging physical stamina was a problem to be solved, and she attacked the source, her spiritual energy generation, with the same relentless analysis, she applied to a toxicological puzzle. And then, at the beginning of the third grueling week, Kakashi introduced a new parallel layer of torment, elemental nature transformation. Gathered by a small, clear stream at the edge of Training Ground 7, their bodies still humming with the day's fatigue, Kakashi presented the next mountain. Chakra is neutral energy, he explained, holding a leaf on his palm. To make it do something, to cut, to burn, to erode, you must impress your will upon it, give it a nature. He demonstrated, and the leaf split cleanly down the middle with a faint snick. Wind, precise, sharp, relentless. He then turned to the stream. Sakura, your earth nature is about stability, endurance, and consuming. He placed a leaf on the water's surface. Sakura, her mind already weaving the theory with her medical understanding of density and molecular cohesion, focused. Her chakra, still modest in volume but wielded with surgeon's precision, coated the leaf. It did not sink dramatically. It grew waterlogged, heavy, and slowly dissolved, its fibers breaking down and mingling with the silt at the bottom. It was a slow, deliberate act of consumption. Earth was not always a wall. Sometimes it was a quiet, patient entropy. Thus, their lives became a brutal trinity. The hellish crucible of the body under the sun, the quiet, intense forge of the mind and spirit in solitude, and the delicate, frustrating art of bending the very essence of their energy to an elemental will. They moved through their days in a cycle of exertion, study, and focused strain, each discipline feeding into and compounding the others. They were no longer just training, they were undergoing a total, immersive reconstruction. And in the shimmer of heat over the training ground, in the silent pages of a scroll, and in the dissolving leaf in a stream, the shinobi who would inherit a brother's eyes and a village's shadows were being built, layer by agonizing layer. 3.5 months of relentless, sun-up-to-sundown reconstruction had etched itself into their very beings. The softness of youth had been burned away in the forge of Kakashi's regimen, replaced by a honed, quiet readiness. When Naruto walked through the village streets towards the familiar bridge, their designated meeting point for the new phase of training, he moved with a predator's loose-limbed grace. His custom bow was a silent presence on his back, secured not by mere straps, but by a subconscious, constant thread of chakra, a testament to months of dual-focused conditioning. His new, sharpened senses, amplified by the dormant Sharingan and relentless drills, caught a flicker of observation from the mouth of a shaded alley. A boy, pale as parchment with jet-black hair, and a smile that was a perfect, empty curve, watched him. The gaze was analytical, dissecting, devoid of human warmth. Naruto's onyx eyes slid over the figure without acknowledgement and moved on. Strangers with vacant smiles were low on his list of concerns. He had a brother's legacy to uphold, and a sensei's grueling standards to meet. He arrived at the bridge to find Sakura already there, a picture of focused tranquility. She sat on the railing, a thick, well-thumbed tome open on her lap, Flora of the Marshlands, Toxic and Medicinal Properties. The severe bun was in place, her gloved fingers tracing a diagram of a capillary system in a leaf. The once gangling girl had filled out with lean, cable-like muscle, her posture radiating a calm, coiled strength. "Morning, Sakura-chan," Naruto said, his voice now a deeper, more grounded rumble. Sakura glanced up, her green eyes holding a familiar sharpness but none of the old fluster. "Hello," she replied, her tone even, before returning her gaze to her book. A comfortable, earned silence settled between them, born of shared hardship and mutual, unspoken understanding. They had sweated, bled, and pushed each other through the crucible. Words were often superfluous. Naruto busied himself inspecting one of his new custom kane, a sleek, deadly thing with a unique double-tip design for specialized penetration, a project from Hagarashi's forge he'd been refining. The piece was shattered not by a sound, but by a sudden, silent disturbance in the air. A serpent, wrought not from flesh but from flowing, violent black ink, materialized from the shadow of the bridge and lunged for Naruto's exposed neck. He didn't turn, his head didn't move. His right hand, holding the kunai, simply flicked out in a short, devastating arc. The ink serpent's head separated from its body, dissolving into a harmless splash of dark droplets on the wooden planks before the rest of the construct dissipated. Sakura snapped her book shut with a decisive thump, sliding off the railing into a ready crouch, her medical text vanishing into a pouch. Her eyes scanned the surroundings, cold and analytical. "It seems you have good reflexes," a smooth, toneless voice observed. Sai emerged from the tree line at the bridge's end, his painted smile unwavering. But is that all? Without waiting for an answer, his hands moved. Two lions, sculpted from the same aggressive ink, burst from the scroll in his hands. They were not clumsy drawings. They moved with terrifying speed and coordinated ferocity, one leaping for Naruto's chest, the other circling to flank Sakura. Naruto didn't retreat. He exploded upwards, clearing the first lion's pounce. As he ascended, his left hand shot down, not to attack, but to seize the second lion by its inky tail as it passed beneath him. Using its own momentum, he whipped the construct around in a full circle and launched it like a living missile straight at Sakura. Sakura didn't flinch. She stepped into the trajectory. Her black-gloved hands, held before her in tight fists, suddenly flushed with a deep, rocky brown as earth nature chakra hardened over her knuckles and forearms. She didn't dodge the ink beast. She met it with two short, devastating jabs. The first punch stopped its charge dead. The second shattered its form entirely, exploding it into a cloud of black mist that settled on the ground like strange rain. It was a display of fearsome, economical power earth style used not for defense, but for concentrated, obliterating offense. Sai's smile didn't falter. If anything, it seemed to tighten. In a fluid motion, he drew the tanto from his back. The polished steel gleamed dully in the morning light. He didn't speak another word. He simply charged Naruto, his movement a blur of efficient, lethal intent. "Chen," Naruto grunted, a sound of pure focus. With a thought, he severed the chakra thread holding his staff. It dropped into his waiting right hand in a seamless, practiced motion. He met Sai's charge. The clash of steel on seasoned oak rang out across the water. For several seconds, it was a whirlwind. Naruto's style was a hybrid monster Uchiha interception, and flow merged with his own brutal, overwhelming power and the sweeping, leverage-based principles of his Bijutsu study. But Sai was a revelation. His Kenjutsu was flawless, a product of brutal, amoral efficiency. Every parry was minimal, every thrust aimed at a vital point, every feint believable. He was technically superior, pressing Naruto with a cold, relentless precision that spoke of a lifetime dedicated solely to the art of killing. They broke apart after a furious exchange, both breathing slightly harder. Sai didn't let the distance last. His free hand flew to the scroll at his hip. A swarm of ink snakes, dozens of them, erupted and streaked towards Naruto in a chaotic, enveloping wave. Naruto's left hand formed a single-handed seal ram. At the same time, he hurled his staff straight into the heart of the swarm, but this was no mere throw. As the staff left his hand, it began to spin like a drill, and across its oak shaft, small, fierce arcs of blue-white lightning crackled to life with a sound like tearing paper. Chidori *-inspired chakra flow, applied not to a hand but to a weapon. The lightning-wreathed staff tore through the ink swarm like a sunbeam through fog, vaporizing the constructs instantly in pops of ozone and spent chakra. Its momentum spent, it completed its arc and, guided by a subtle application of wind nature chakra Naruto had woven into the throw, spun back towards him in a graceful, returning curve. He caught it without looking, the lightning subsiding. Sakura chose that moment to move. She hadn't been idle. While Naruto dealt with the swarm, she had infused her discarded medical text with a dense shell of earth nature chakra. It was no longer a book. It was a bludgeon with the density of a river stone. She hurled it not at Sai, but at the tree just behind him, predicting a dodge. Sai, sensing the projectile, sidestepped with elegant ease. The bookshot missed him by inches and slammed into the thick trunk of a training post pine with a sickening crunch thud. It didn't bounce off. It embedded itself 3 inches deep into the wood, splintering the bark and leaving the tome half-buried, pages fluttering. It was a terrifying demonstration of control, taking a harmless object, and through chakra alone, transforming it into a siege weapon. Before the first splinter hit the ground, before a word of challenge or question could be exchanged, a lazy drawl cut through the tension. "Smart. Kakashi Hatake emerged from the tree line on the bridge, his single eye crinkled in a smile that didn't reach the rest of his face. He looked at the scene, the dissipating ink stains, the lightly smoking staff in Naruto's hand, the book embedded in the tree, and the 3 genin locked in a silent, hostile triangle. "What an exceptional clash of genin," he remarked. his tone dripping with a faux casualness that did nothing to mask the sharp appraisal in his gaze. The first, unscripted test of the new dynamic was over. The results were written in ink, lightning, and splintered wood. The air on the bridge, still tinged with the ozone scent of discharged lightning, and the faint, acrid smell of spent ink, hung thick with unspoken challenge. Sakura's earth-infused book remained grotesquely lodged in the tree, a silent testament to the violence that had just crackled through the peaceful morning. Naruto held his staff loosely, the last blue-white sparks fading from the steel caps. His onyx eyes fixed on the pale newcomer with a gaze that was no longer just wary, but coldly analytical. Sai himself had resheathed his tanto, his painted smile back in its perfect, placid place, as if the attempted decapitation and swarm attack had been a mere handshake. Into this frozen tableau, Kakashi's languid pronouncement dropped like a stone. "Now," he said, his voice cutting through the tension with deliberate nonchalance, "this is Sai, your new teammate." The words were simple, their impact was seismic. For Naruto, it was as if the world tilted slightly on its axis. Teammate. The word was sacred, forged in the blood of the land of waves, sealed in the darkness of a hospital room with a brother's last breath. It belonged to Sasuke, it belonged to Sakura. It was a title earned through shared suffering, through mutual grudging respect that had deepened into unbreakable loyalty. This smiling phantom with ink for blood and emptiness in his eyes was an obscene replacement. The cold analysis in Naruto's gaze heated into a spark of something dangerous, not the old, loud outrage, but a deep, protective fury that thrummed in his newly dense chakra. His grip on the bow tightened infinitesimally. For Sakura, the announcement triggered a different, but equally fierce, calculus. Her mind, always processing, instantly shifted from combat assessment to strategic threat analysis. This Sai was not a genin. His techniques were too refined, his killing intent too clinical, his demeanor too detached from normal human interaction. He was an insert, a tool placed into their dynamic. Her eyes flicked from Sai's hollow smile to Kakashi's carefully neutral face, then to Naruto's tense posture. Her resolve, the one forged in grief and dedicated to becoming Naruto's shield, hardened into a new immediate objective: evaluate, contain, protect. This new variable had to be managed, its purpose understood, and its potential to harm her remaining precious person neutralized. Sai, for his part, offered a shallow, perfectly measured bow. "It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance," he said, the words correct, the tone utterly devoid of any genuine pleasure. "I look forward to working with you both to strengthen the team." His eyes lingered for a fraction of a second too long on Naruto, specifically on his eyes, before sliding to Sakura, taking in her gloves, her posture, the embedded book. He was gathering data just as they were. Kakashi observed the silent storm of reactions swirling between his three students. He saw Naruto's simmering, honor-bound rejection, Sakura's icy analytical guard, and Sai's robotic compliance. This was the fracture line, the fault upon which the new Team 7 would either be built or would shatter. "I know it's sudden," Kakashi continued, his tone losing its feigned laziness, becoming one of blunt command. "But the composition of a three-man cell is non-negotiable for operational viability. Sai comes highly recommended from specialized training programs. He will fill the vacancy." He let the word vacancy hang in the air, a stark, brutal reminder of the ghost that would forever occupy the space where a fourth should stand. Your little spar was informative. Naruto, your integration of elemental chakra flow into a weapon is crude but shows terrifying promise. Sakura, your chakra control and application of earth nature for targeted offense is exceptional. Sai, your ink techniques and kenjutsu are of Jonin-level precision, if somewhat impersonal. He stepped forward, his presence expanding to dominate the bridge. "The dynamics have changed. The training intensifies from today. You will learn to function as a unit with him. You will cover his weaknesses and he will cover yours. Like it or not," Kakashi said, his lone eye piercing each of them in turn, "he is part of Team 7 now. Your first team exercise with your new teammate begins in 1 hour. Be ready." With that, he turned and shunshined away in a swirl of leaves, leaving the three genin alone in the aftermath of the announcement and the fight. The silence that followed was heavier than before, now loaded with bureaucracy, loss, and a deep mutual distrust. The bridge was no longer just a meeting place. It had become the shaky, contested ground zero of a painfully reassembled team, where the legacy of a fallen brother stared across a chasm at the empty smile of a stranger who had been ordered to take his place. The real training, it seemed, was no longer just about strength and skill, but about navigating this new, chilling reality. The forced pleasantries hung in the air like a bad smell. Sai's declaration, "It's nice to meet you, I'll be your new teammate," was delivered with a smile so meticulously crafted, it seemed painted on porcelain, devoid of any warmth or genuine sentiment. Naruto's response was a single, explosive sound of pure disgust from the back of his throat. It was more than a dismissal, it was an expulsion of the very idea. Sakura's analysis was colder, sharper, a surgeon's blade. What an introduction," she stated, her green eyes dissecting him from head to toe. "You were close to being scraped off the ground." Her words weren't a boast, they were a factual report on the outcome of his failed ambush. Sai merely responded with a soft, airy chuckle. HM. The sound was as artificial as his smile, a programmed response to social friction. Naruto's patience, always a short fuse, now burned with the intensity of a sun. He took a half step forward, the air around him growing heavier with the density of his chakra. "You better get that fake smile off your face," he growled, his voice low and venomous, "or I will do it for you." Sai's painted smile didn't waver. His empty eyes flickered to Naruto's onyx gaze, then down, as if recalling a file. "The owner of those eyes," he remarked, his tone casually observational, "would have." The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Sakura gasped a sharp, involuntary intake of breath, the first true crack in her composed facade since the funeral. Her gloved hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a horror that was part memory, part outrage at the violation. She stared at Sai as if he'd just desecrated a grave. Naruto didn't move. He looked down, the longer bangs of his mane shadowing his face, obscuring his expression. But his knuckles on the staff were white. The air grew cold. "Take that back," he said, the words barely a whisper, yet they carried the weight of a tectonic plate shifting. Sai tilted his head, a parody of curiosity. "You must be stupid or something. What should I take bar?" The word was obliterated by a sound like a muffled gong. "OOOOFF." Sai's eyes bulged, his perfect composure shattered into genuine, pained surprise. He looked down. The steel-capped end of Naruto's bow was buried deep in his solar plexus. There had been no flashy movement, no telegraphed wind-up. It was a thrust of pure, brutal efficiency, born of rage and 1,000 hours of drilling the Uchiha's interceptive style. The fake smile was finally gone, replaced by a grimace of shock and agony as the air was violently expelled from his lungs. Naruto, a snarl twisting his features, began to pivot, the staff pulling back for a truly devastating follow-through swing that would have surely shattered bone. But before the motion could complete, Sakura was there. Not in front of him, but at his side, her earth-reinforced hands clamping onto his arm and the shaft of the staff with surprising strength. "Don't, Naruto," she hissed, her voice urgent in his ear. "You'll send him to the hospital." The logical part of her mind screamed that this intruder deserved it, but the strategist, the protector, knew a severe assault on her officially assigned teammate, no matter how repulsive, would have consequences Kakashi and the Hokage could not overlook. It would derail everything. From the tree line at the edge of the clearing, Sai's voice came again, smooth and unbothered. "Send who to the hospital?" Naruto and Sakura froze. Naruto's head whipped around. The Sai before him, the one still doubled over from the gut strike, was dissolving, its form slumped not into a puff of smoke, but into a puddle of thick black ink that spread across the wooden planks of the bridge. An ink clone, a supremely convincing one down to the mockery and the pained expression. The real Sai stepped calmly from the shadows of the trees, his smile back in place, pristine and infuriating. "I thought you would be more skilled," he mused, brushing a non-existent speck of dust from his sleeve. "But I think I overestimated you, letting emotion cloud your perception so completely. A shinobi should be better than that." Naruto wrenched his arm from Sakura's grip, his fury now a cold, simmering geyser. He stared at the puddle of ink, then at the unscathed boy in the trees. The insult, the manipulation. The casual cruelty towards Sasuke's memory, and now this, tactical humiliation. He spat again, the sound dripping with a new profound contempt. "Arrogant bastard." The line was irrevocably drawn. This was not a teammate. This was an adversary who had been placed in their midst. And as Naruto stood there, his stolen eyes burning with a brother's pride and his own furious hurt, and Sakura positioned herself subtly between him and the new threat, the foundational truth of the new Team 7 was laid bare. It was not a team of 3, but a wary alliance of 2, with a dangerous, smiling unknown forced into the space where trust and brotherhood were supposed to reside. The first real battle had already been lost, not on strength, but on emotional sabotage and cruel precision.
And that wraps up this part of Combined Legacies. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next part of the story. Every notification, every view, it really helps keep this series going. Until next time, this is Six Paths Theorist, signing off.